So I recognize many of you from Organizational Development 1, and this is Organizational Development 2. And 3 is coming up in just a few days, right? What is 3? The 11th? Yeah. Right. So then we have a little bit of a gap between 3 and the rest of them. So let's look at some of the topics we're going to be covering today. Basically, this slide is usually from the curriculum. We spoke in OD1 about many of the fundraising and other bringing in money kinds of things. Today we're going to be speaking about making the most of what you have, and that in some ways is easier than bringing in money, and in some ways more challenging, because you've got to sometimes deal with an entrenched status quo and effect change, and there's usually a innate resistance to change. People just like to keep on doing things the way they are, but in these kinds of economic times, often you have to look for novel, sometimes drastic ways to make the most of what you have. So these are the topics we're going to be covering today. There was one other that was in there originally in the curriculum that I took out because it's been covered in several of the other sequences, and that's coaching and mentoring. We will be talking about it a little bit, but I don't want to spend too much time on it because there's a wealth of additional material that I did want to spend more time on. So using volunteers effectively, where do you find them? How do you onboard them? What's the process for hiring them? What they're good for, what they're not good for, what the advantages are, what the disadvantages are. Staff employment models, and I'm sure most of your organizations that have employees are familiar with at least some of these. We'll be discussing pluses and minuses, one versus the other, hourly versus full-time, home-based versus office-based, and some of the legal and reporting implications of the models. Of course, with the understanding that I'm not here to give general legal or financial advice, but just to point out some of the issues you need to be aware of, to consult whoever gives you that kind of advice. Time tracking techniques. Now that's usually the classic way of making the most of what you have is to increase productivity. And in fact, we see that in the American economy in the past couple of years, with the economy being in a difficult state and companies having to lay off people, but still have to deliver goods and services. So this is becoming a big factor in the profit sector, and of course it's just as important in the nonprofit sector. You've got to know where you're spending the money, if in fact it's all being spent effectively, and if it's not, how do you rearrange things so that it is. Outsourcing, which we'll define when we get to it in more detail, but basically it means saying, here's a chunk of work that I currently do with staff in-house, with one of those models that we mentioned earlier, but I want to send it to somebody else to do. And there's a lot of resistance to that, both in the for-profit and not-for-profit sector, but when it's crunch time, people tend to look at things that they might not have wanted to consider before, and there are lots of advantages, and it has to be done with some knowledge or forethought. We're going to be talking about that. Partnering, which we broached already in OD1. We'll talk about it now a little bit in more detail. Basically, that means identifying other nonprofit organizations, or maybe even for-profit organizations in your area that you can partner with, from simple ways to more complicated ways. Joint purchasing is a simple way. Running joint events or even joint programs is a more complicated way. But these are all ways that you can continue to deliver services without cutting back on services in a way that enables you to get by with spending less. And going green. Going green generally means operating in a way that's more friendly to the environment, and we're not here to preach in favor of being more friendly to the environment necessarily, but generally what that also implies is making the most of the fuel and other consumable resources that you use to conserve them, and by conserving them, you're also spending less, so you're saving money. So in that context, going green belongs in this presentation as well, although we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. So I think you all know me, and I think we can dispense with we'll just go around quickly, and everybody says, you know, who they are to remind each other, name and money, right? For purposes of our discussion, a volunteer is somebody who works for you for nothing. And in contrast to most people, you know, rationally enough, would like to get some remuneration for the hard work that they put on your behalf. So why do people? Yeah.
Would you make a decision an intern that's getting, like, who's going there because of getting credit? I mean, getting like volunteers who really are just altruistic, looking for something to do, versus somebody who is also kind of fulfilling a requirement, or you put them all in one?
Well, I'm gonna, yeah. Well, we will distinguish between them, but yeah, I mean, right now, for the purpose of the discussion, we're lumping them all together. They range from, as you say, interns who want the experience, people who are very just giving and altruistic and don't really need the income and just want to give back, help the community, or seniors who were productive, retired, find themselves going crazy, and they're fit and healthy and want something useful to do, and so they volunteer, and they come in all shapes, sizes, and colors and stripes, and there'll be advantages and disadvantages.
Are we going to get the sheets today?
Yeah. Randy went to make them. I made some changes to the presentation since I originally prepared it for about a month ago. So he's copying them again. Where do you find volunteers? Very often, they'll just walk in your door and say, hi, I heard about your organization, and we spoke up last time about PR and getting the word out, and letting people know about your organization. And one of the interesting side effects of doing something like that is you will sometimes excite the interest of volunteers. And so they walk in the door and they say, here I am, and I've always enjoyed education or elder care or whatever it is, and I hear you do that, and I want to help. I'm an extra pair of hands for you. But you may not always be that. More often than not, you won't be that lucky, or you may have one or two like that. But you want to see if you can find more. And so there are clearinghouses for finding volunteers. And on that slide, I have the URLs of a few of them. These are fairly big and fairly popular in the New York metro area. And Idealist in particular, everybody, I'm sure in this room has probably encountered them, heard about them in some way. And they themselves, in fact, all of these organizations themselves work heavily on the basis of volunteers. What's happening here is that somebody wants to volunteer, but they may not have heard of your organization, or may not know what the choices are. They want to employ their efforts where it'll do the most good and they'll be the most valued. So they sign up with the clearinghouse and say, okay, here's my objective. Here are the hours that I'm available. Here's the neighborhoods that I want to work. Here are my skills. Here's what I can do in my background. And then on the other hand, organizations like your own are going to go to these same clearinghouses and say, okay, here I am in this neighborhood. This is the kind of the person that I need. These are the hours, and so on. And they just do traditional matchmaking. As I said, this has been going on for a while, this kind of thing. But now it mostly happens online, which is nice because you're drawing from a much larger pool than in the past. And typically, what happens is that when they think there's something plausible, the potential volunteer will go down and meet whoever it is who's doing the hiring for the organization. A larger organization would have an HR person doing this too, or one of the people who are functioning in that role, one of the administrators, and so they'll try to qualify the volunteer and find out something about why they want to do it, and are they a good fit, and are they a fit with the cultural milieu in your organization, and just pretty much like qualifying any employee, and on that basis you decide do you want to work with this person or not? And the person will decide that they want to work with you or not. There are obvious advantages to having volunteers, but as we'll see, there are definitely going to be disadvantages as well. And so, if you're aware of them, you can work around them and get the most benefit out of having volunteers in your organization. So, we already said we're defining a volunteer as somebody who'll work for you for nothing. So there's your first top bullet item advantage. It's free. But that's not to say that even in the days where things were not quite as bad economically, people weren't using volunteers. That's certainly not the only benefit to having volunteers work for your organization. Volunteers are often highly motivated and enthusiastic. They're doing it for altruistic reasons, or very often they are doing it for altruistic reasons, and they have a strong belief, maybe even a passion in the cause that your organization is supporting. And especially if you're a smaller organization and you, the executive director, started that organization because of a passion, and you got up and you did it. Well, not everybody has the the gumption or the know-how to get up and do it themselves. So they want to find an organization that's already started and go ahead and take advantage of the already existing infrastructure and do it with them and for them. Definitely, now that's not to say that people who get paid money can't be motivated and enthusiastic, and I'm sure most of your employees are. Just pragmatically, they have to put food on the table. But typically, it's part of the profile of somebody who volunteers that they really are motivated and enthusiastic. So, as I mentioned earlier, volunteers are not necessarily young, and they're not necessarily old. I mean, they come in all sizes and flavors. But if a volunteer is young and is just out of school and building the skills necessary to make a career out of the kinds of things that you're having them do in your organization, and we're talking about advantages to you now. It's a good feeling if you're a nonprofit organization, and by definition are doing something that is socially beneficial, to have the additional benefit of helping out somebody who's coming to help you. So that's a good feeling, and that's that often makes for a good working relationship, because there's mutual gratitude going on over there. You as the responsible party in your organization are grateful for what these people are doing for you. They in turn are grateful for what they're getting from you, and so that makes for a good working relationship. And many organizations, the difficult thing about HR in general is that somebody can look nice on paper and the references check out well, and the things went well on the interview, and then you hire them, and it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. So if somebody's working for you as a volunteer, you can utilize what's called the try and buy model. They come to work on time, they do the work well, they show that they're honest and have integrity, they get along well with their colleagues. Wow, wonderful! Now if somebody's working for you while they're going to school, at some point they'll graduate and be looking for more regular employment and actually get paid money, and so you've got to be on top of that and say, hey Joe, it's February, you're going to be graduating in June. What are your plans? Would you consider working for this organization? You've been volunteering here for the past year and a half, and we all love you, and seems like you like this organization. You would fit very well into such and such a role, and we can offer you such and such a starting salary. Of course, that's beneficial for both parties as well. So you save yourself, a lot of the potential grief in hiring somebody that doesn't work out, and then having to start all over again, and the fallout of getting rid of somebody. So it's a good way to bring people along without a lot of the risk that goes along with traditional HR. And, on the other hand, there are disadvantages, and you have